So this is essay number 2, and this is going to pick up the second part of this, especially developing and drafting a thesis, but also very much the first part as well, because drafting a thesis has everything to do with fine-tuning your topic. What you'll find if you're anything like me is that it's not easy to summarize your argument in a sentence, which is what a thesis asks you to do, and doing so has everything to do with sort of figuring out what you want to say, what you want to argue, fine-tuning your topic itself. Let me talk just a little bit, though, about kind of what goes into this type of essay. Again, you're going to need, in the end, a single claim, not 3 points to make or something like that, 3 different suggestions or solutions. You want to make a single kind of overall claim in your essay, even if it has different parts. But both of these kind of sides here are going to contribute to your essay. You're going to give positive reasons for your solution, and you're going to give arguments that there's a need for your solution. And I want to make a few suggestions about these two. In some papers, the problem will be a dominant part of the paper, will be a big part of the paper. In some papers it will be a small part, and the solution itself will be a much, much bigger part, and the reasons for it. There is no correct balance here. It depends on what sort of topic you're choosing. If you want to make a very positive proposal or argument for a change, you can do that. But in every paper you'll need some clear sense of a problem and a clear solution. Here's mine that I'm going to use, in part because I figured nobody else would argue this. I'm going to use as my example here this claim. Community service ought to be a requirement for college graduation in Michigan. You might think that's a crazy suggestion. It's bold for sure. Let me suggest the first thing you might do when you come up with a solution or a proposal is really question each part of it. So I might say to myself, well, what do I mean by community service? Do I mean volunteering? Do internships count? Do I just mean hands-on applications? Do I mean any experience that gets students off of campus? What is community service exactly? And I think typically it means volunteering, but that would be an issue I might even deal with in the paper. This might be a big part of the paper. Ought to be a requirement. Should I just go with recommended, encouraged, possibility, ought to be rewarded, ought to be a requirement for some, etc. And then for graduation, should I make it nationwide, just DC? Should I argue kind of a local argument? Or should I argue perhaps that it should be in high school, or ought to be encouraged from the youngest grades? If I ended up arguing something like that, it's a very, very different paper with very different problems and very different reasons. So all of that comes into play as you fine-tune your argument, you fine-tune your thesis, but you also fine-tune the points you're going to make. After this video, I'll ask you to try to write your own proposal as a single statement too, and just to repeat, it might take several tries. You might need to do a lot of brainstorming, but doing so I think will help you fine-tune your own topic. So I changed this slightly. Some significant community service ought to be a requirement for college graduation, and certainly in a paper I'd have to define what that is. Back to this though, I want to talk about the two sides now and suggest some ways to go to move forward. Again, to brainstorm, but also to plan your paper and move toward a paper. I might say, okay, because education focuses too much on academic knowledge rather than real-world understanding, I'd have to make an argument for that, but I could make one. That's a because statement that summarizes the need for this solution. I might also give that as a positive reason for it, because community service would get students out of the classroom and into communities. And then you'll see what I'm going to do with these. I'm going to ask you to create your own as well. But another problem, because college can become too closed off, etc., or a positive argument, because community service would get students out of the classroom and into communities. A few more here, because college students have so many gifts or abilities to offer the world, or because college students are often funded in part by government loans. All of those are reasons I might give for my solution. These are reasons I might give for the need for it. But then notice what I might do with that. Well, here, first I'll say that after the video, I'll ask you to brainstorm some of these as well. You've already done a lot of brainstorming here and perhaps some here. It's pretty simple to put them into because statements, but doing so forces you to kind of summarize them in a single sentence. But now notice how I can use those to create a possible thesis statement, a working thesis statement. If I took one of my reasons, combined it with my statement, my proposed solution statement, all of a sudden I have at least a potential working thesis. Because of its benefits both for those who volunteer and for the wider world, community service ought to be a requirement for college graduation in Michigan. I slightly revised this, but the basic idea is I took a reason and combined it with my claim. I have a thesis. I could take a problem. Because a typical college education today focuses too much on purely academic knowledge, not enough on real-world understanding, a semester of internship, community service, or overseas study ought to be a requirement for graduation. And notice I've totally changed this paper by tweaking the claim. Instead of saying a semester of community service or something, I said it should be significant, but it could be some different things. And that's a different argument. Perhaps less bold, maybe more persuasive, I don't know. And then what I did here was actually took a problem and two reasons and my claim, and I have a long but pretty effective thesis statement, or effective in the sense that it's almost a whole argument in one sentence. In light of the great needs our communities face today, the great impact college students might have on their communities, and the considerable investment taxpayers make by funding student loans for college students, for all those reasons, colleges ought to require at least a single semester or summer of significant community service. And in a sense, what I've done with simple because statements and claim is I've crafted a working thesis that summarizes a whole argument, and then each of these would be a potential paragraph in that paper. So what I want you to do is go back to your notes you started after the first video and think about this in your own case and work through this with your own topic. First, try to write a good single sentence statement of the solution you are proposing or the basic argument you're making. Like I said, it might be hard, it might be easy for some of you, it might be hard for others. It might be as simple as schools ought to increase funding for the arts, or that sort of thing. But really work on getting your main claim into a single sentence. Then try to write at least 5 or 6 or maybe 8 or 10 because statements, using some of the things you've already come up with, to summarize supporting arguments, both reasons and problems, for your proposal. And then finally, do some experimenting with working thesis statements. You don't have to use the word because. You may if you want to, but put some of those statements together with your statement in number 1 and see what kind of working thesis statements you can come up with. Put together at least a few, at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 experiments that might help you then draft a paper after you have it. All right, do that work and then move on to the short videos 3 and 4, and before finishing your notes and posting them. Thanks.